It's time for movies on books. It's the new show. It's the new name of the show. I'm just making it up as I go. All right. We have I've made the decision to change the name from Sunday Story Time with Romper to Movies on Book with Romper. We're going to be exploring excellent movies on book. Yes, that's my bashy background. I think it's a little bit more appropriate now that we're changing it up a little bit. This is an interesting, experimentation. But yeah, I decided that yeah, we're gonna change the name to Movies on Book. I think that's a much better fucking name. I think it more accurately describes it, and I think it's a fucking awesome name. Yuri's gonna be trying to also try and come in here. Same time, I've moved into the living room because last time that shit was sucky. I rewatched my video and that shit sucked. That was like horrible bandwidth the whole time. So in the living room now, should be live for you. Should be good. Should be sounding good. Should be looking good. Should be no problems. No problem whatsoever. But yeah, so we're on part 2 of Gremlins, and Billy's about to get the damn gizmo this week. It's gonna be awesome. So we're gonna find out what's going on, and we're gonna hopefully get to these beautiful color photos. This week I've got some delicious mint tea that I'm gonna be rocking, and makes my throat so much better. Didn't do a show yesterday because I had a whole bunch of indigestion from some issues on Saturday. So like it really came the whole way up, like everywhere. It was just ugh, it was awful. But today I'm feeling great. Today I'm feeling real good, and I'm ready to get into the extra tasty bits that are like available in this book. Like that's the pretty cool part, is all the extra fun shit that they got going on. A little bit of back history about Mogwai and being created by Mogderman. That's pretty fucking awesome. I thoroughly enjoyed that. We're working on a theme song here for Movies on Book, and if anybody wants to help me with that, I am totally down to accept anyone's help. And I want to, yeah, have a little intro and do a little bit more production stuff with this, so it's a little bit more presentable, a little bit more fun for the random passerby that might happen upon this stream that aren't my friends, that are going to be amazing and support me all the time. But yeah, I think 2021 is going to be a good year to take Movies on Book to the next level. I'm also going to be trying to do 2 a week. We'll see. If this turns out pretty great, like doing it at this time or whatever, then we're going to try it in some afternoons and things like that. I kind of like the idea of doing it in the afternoon and doing it like, yeah, as a nightly story, as like a, yeah, I like it. When you would sit down and be watching a movie, Well, without further ado, Movies on Book presents Gremlins Part 2. This book comes with a little bit of a disclaimer. It's got a little bit of outdated language and things like that, pertaining to, other ethnicities and things like that. Yeah, it contains negative descriptions and depictions of people or cultures, and rather than alter the text, I'd like to acknowledge that these stereotypes happened and they have a harmful impact now. It was wrong then and it's wrong now. So we're not going to talk like that. You may hear it in this book. Don't call people that. Don't be mean. That's all there is to it. Don't be an asshole. Don't be a fucking asshole. All right. Chapter 7. Lynn Peltzer always felt an extra twinge of nervousness around Christmas time. It hadn't always been that way. Growing up in a suburb of Pittsburgh, she had a fairly normal child of a middle-class family. Christmas excited her because she usually received some new clothes and a few special things. In addition, she enjoyed picking out presents for other people, anticipating their joy as they opened them. Though not especially religious, she also enjoyed the holiday because it seemed symbolic of a new hope, kindness, and generosity. Now, until she met Rand Peltzer, did she begin to associate Christmas with danger. Not until. That would make more sense. Neither he nor she had intended it to happen that way. Nearly a quarter century before, when they were married, both of them had high expectations that someday Rand would have his face on the cover of Time magazine. He had not gone to college, but when he patented a simple device that made it easier for laundries to locate their customers' clothes, he seemed to be on his way. Taking a smooth talking friend's advice, Rand quit his job in sporting goods department of a large store and invested in himself, as he put it. His lifelong desire was to be another Thomas Edison, and to that end he forthwith applied himself. I assumed that he was going to steal every single one of his ideas, because Thomas Edison sucked. Back to the story. The money ran out soon. Most of the inventions gathered dust, and eventually he was forced to find a job selling other people's wares. But Rand never really gave up. Working in his spare time, he continued to conceive and construct new instruments to benefit society. The problem was that they were usually tested first on Lynn, and almost always as Christmas presents. The first year, Lynn received an automatic, painless ear-piercing device for use in the home. It sent Len to the hospital emergency room Christmas night, and it was well into New Year's before she could remove the bandages from her earlobes. The next year, an improved fingernail polish remover caused something strange and crusty to grow on her nails and remain there for several months. Other devices, such as pineapple parers, automatic shoe buffers, cleaning poles capable of reaching anywhere, and fish cleaners, all came neatly wrapped at Christmas, were duly tried, failed, and recalled for improvements. Most, fortunately, never saw the light of day again. A good sport, Rand shook his head and adored the jokes generated by his failures, but the light bulb of inspiration never left its permanent spot above his head. Lind wondered what would be this year. Her wonder was not alloyed with dread, but with uncertainty. It would be nice to prepare herself if that was possible. The real problem, she supposed, was that she simply couldn't tell Rand to just stop inventing things and trying them out on her. She loved the big guy, and if she ever gave up his quirky habit, it would kill her. Such feelings of love, however, did not cause her to flinch less as the annual day of present giving approached. Excuse me. "It'll be all right," she said aloud to herself, adding optimistically, "Last year was easy with the tomato dicer. We had the ceiling cleaned in minutes, washed our faces, and that was that." Removing the meatloaf from the oven, she caught a glimpse of herself in the glass door, with her styled gray hair and face that was marred only by character lines. No sense calling them wrinkles just yet. She was remarkably well preserved for 47. She was reasonably content with life, and well aware of the fact that whatever excitement was due her and had probably happened already. But she often wondered how things would have turned out if it had been the wet breadwinner instead of Rand. He was tenacious, but she was a fighter. He traveled circuitous routes. She bored straight ahead. Sometimes Lind wondered how she would have handled herself if, not having been aboard several decades too soon, she had been drafted into the army and asked to fight for her country. Surprisingly, the idea intrigued her, rather than repelled or frightened her. "Too late now," she said, looking at the clock. Billy was already late for dinner, even considering the fact that he had to walk home. As for Rand, there was no telling when he would walk in. A moment later, she heard the front door open, and a beat after that, the clatter of an object hitting the floor of the living room. Those crossed swords again, Lynn thought with a sigh, putting the meatloaf on the counter and moving to the hallway. Billy was in the process of picking up the swords and restored them to the shaky holder, which had been designed by Rand in a moment of inspiration. Anybody can drive a nail into the wall and hold up those swords, he had argued. It takes a genius to create a decorative holder that doesn't damage the plaster. No doubt about it, Lynn mused as she watched Billy delicately restore the balance of power against the wall. That holder is beautiful and doesn't hurt the wall, but it sure makes a racket when one or both of those swords hits the floor, especially when it happens in the middle of the night. "Hi, Mom," Billy smiled, taking off his jacket, aiming it for the chair, then taking it to the closet. "Dinner's ready," she said. "Okay," he said. "I'll be there in a minute." "Before you go," he waited, framed in the doorway. Her expression told him that something was wrong. Not tragic, but definitely unpleasant. "I got a call from Mrs. Deagle this afternoon," Lynn began. "Oh." Billy walked to the kitchen. "I know she's a terrible person, Billy, but it seems you go out of your way to make her angry." "No, I don't, Mom. She's just mean and out to get me. She'd like to get everybody." "She says you broke her ceramic snowman." "It was broken already. Barney must have bumped it. Did she tell you I saved one of her cats from being run over by the car?" "No." "See, she only tells you the bad stuff." Nevertheless. The sound of the front door opening interrupted their conversation, which would have been drowned anyway by Rand's booming voice. "Silent night, holy night," he sang, giving the old song an uncharacteristically upbeat tempo. La 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 la. "Let's not talk about it now," Lynn said softly. "Not in front of your father." "We still have a minute," Billy said, smiling, while he puts the sword back. As if in echo, there followed the sound of the front door closing and the crash of metal a moment later. Rand's singing immediately became louder, undercut by the sound of the sword being returned to its shaky position against the wall. "Sleep in heavenly peace, fa-la-la." Smiling and ebullient, Rand entered the kitchen, his arms loaded with packages. After putting them carefully on the kitchen table, he gave Lynn a kiss, Billy a hug, and Barney a pat on the head. "Have a nice trip?" Lynn asked. "Not bad," he replied. "Miracle, the company that makes the kitchen companion, might be interested in the bathroom buddy. It's got one or two problems I have to iron out, though." Lynn suspected there wouldn't be a sale. They would muddle through, however, and Christmas wasn't the time to worry about long-range economics. You could drive yourself crazy. It was nice having Rand home for the moment, and that was all that mattered. He picked a package off the table and thrust it at her. Automatically, Lynn flinched, then took it. "It's just a poinsettia," Rand said. "Not a real present. You'll get that later." "Oh, thank you," she murmured, putting the potted plant on the sink. "It's beautiful." What's in the other package?" Billy asked. Rand walked back to the table. "These are presents for you and your mom that can't be opened until Christmas," he answered. "This one can't wait." He gently lifted the burlap-covered box. "What is it?" Billy asked. "Is it alive?" "Turn off the lights," Rand said. Then, realizing that the kitchen's light came solely from a bright overhead incandescent lamp, he shook his head. "Never mind. It'll be easier if we go in the living room." "He must have gotten me a pet bat," Billy laughed as they left the kitchen. Placing the cage on the coffee table, Rand surveyed the living room lighting. "Still too bright," he said. "Where's that light dimmer I made?" Lynn swallowed a bit nervously.
I put it in the drawer, she explained. It was making sounds all by itself, and when it was out, the lights kept blinking on and off.
You don't know how to work it, Rand said, reaching into the drawer.
Never mind, Billy said. I'll turn the lights down.
Rand waved him back to the chair. Listen, he announced in a soft but firm tone. I go to the trouble of making these things so we can relax. They're labor-saving devices, see? What's the point of having them if you keep on doing these things the old-fashioned way? With that, he pointed the flashlight-like device he had located at the nearest lamp. Shattering with a loud popping noise, as if it had been the target of an unseen sniper, the bulb died instantly, its remains tinkling on the end table, which was suddenly gripped by darkness. That's no problem, Rand murmured. That bulb was about to go anyway.
I'll clean it up later, Lynn soothed. First, let's see what's in the package. Yeah, Billy seconded. This'll be the first time I've ever gotten a present that glows in the dark.
Kneeling next to the end table, he reached out and gently lifted the burlap. The creature was predominantly brown and white, about 8 inches tall with long pointed ears and huge brown expressive eyes. Standing upright like a human being, its body was covered in fluffy fur, except for bare spots at the end of its ears, the extensions of its four-fingered hands, and a quadrilateral space for a moist pug nose and a wide mouth resembling that of an elderly gentleman enjoying the luxury of not wearing his dentures. A low, soft noise emanated from the animal, something haunting, but softly urgent.
What is it?
Billy asked, amazed. Your new pet, his father replied.
It looks like something from Australia. It looks like something from Australia, Lynn said, moving closer to the cage. Or Red China. They have a lot of animals there. Then they can't get visas.
Barney looked sideways at his new companion, backed away a few steps. It looked so soft and gentle, but from dealing with squirrels, he knew that the cute ones had the most devilish tricks. A low growl rose involuntarily from his chest.
Come on, Barney, Billy laughed. Be a good boy. He's not going to hurt you.
Returning his attention to the strange animal, Billy put his finger gingerly through the holes in the box to touch it. Surprisingly, the creature did not flinch or cower. Its fur was warm and downy, like that of a Persian cat.
Where'd you find him? Billy asked.
Some old junk store in Chinatown. Had to lay down a bundle for him, too. Lynn looked closely at the creature.
Did he come with papers?
She asked. Rand shook his head.
Well, suppose he has rabies or something,
his wife persisted.
Doesn't he need shots? Is he house-trained?
I guess we'll find out soon enough, Rand muttered. Honey, I don't have time to check that out. I was worried they wouldn't let him get on the plane, as it was. I had to smuggle him aboard in my garment bag. Don't worry, he'll be all right. But Lynn was not to be assured so easily.
What if he's some kind of rat or something? She sniffed.
Billy, tickling Gizmo's chin, looked askance at his mother.
No, he's too cute to be a rat, he said.
Lynn shrugged.
He's cute, all right, but I sure hope he's not carrying something. And speaking of that, how can we be sure he's a he?
The Chinese fella told me he's a he, Rand replied.
A he what? Billy asked. Didn't he say what kind of animal he is?
Yeah, he's a mogwai.
What's that?
I don't know. It's something in Chinese, I think. Anyway, we call him Gizmo, okay?
Why not? Billy said. That's as good as anything, and since we don't know what he is, it sure fits.
Sorry, I got lost. Whew. Gizmo, more at ease now around his new family, had started to hum in his unearthly falsetto tone. The three were delighted and amused by the sound. Billy breaking into applause, only the four-legged creature remained aloof and in the background. Well, Merry Christmas, Rand said. Billy gave him a hug.
Thanks a lot, Dad, he said, smiling. It's really a wonderful present.
Glad you like it, son. When he saw Billy lift the creature from the box and cuddle it to his chest, Lynn couldn't resist the urge to capture the moment on film. Reaching quickly into the drawer, she brought out her Instamatic camera, slid back a few feet until she had Gizmo and Billy neatly framed, then glanced out of the viewfinder.
Okay, smile, she said.
Ooh.
As Gizmo reached up to lick Billy's cheek, Lynn pressed the button. As the flashbulb went off, Gizmo let out a wild shriek, threw himself over Billy's shoulder, and, whining piteously, scrambled beneath the sofa.
What happened? Lynn asked. Forgot to tell you, Ram replied. The little fella's scared of bright lights. That's why I turned the lights down, but I forgot about the flashbulb. As he talked, he fumbled beneath the sofa until he found Gizmo's foot. Come on, boy, he soothed. It's okay. It'll be all right. We won't do that again. Promise. Gentle urging finally calmed Gizmo to the point where he allowed himself to be slid from the cool, dark comfort beneath the sofa. His humming had stopped. Stopped, though, and he shivered slightly.
Still a little scared, I guess, Billy said. He stroked Gizmo's head gently. I should have told you about the
light, Rand said. There's a couple other rules to remember about this guy. At least that's what the Chinese boy said. Number 2 is to keep him away from water. And number 3 is never let him eat after midnight.
Lynn broke into laughter. That's the craziest thing I've ever heard, she said. What difference could it make when he eats?
Don't ask me, Rand replied. I'm just telling you what was said to me.
Lynn stood up. Okay, we'll go along with that. I just hope he doesn't have to eat filet mignon every night.
No, he eats anything, Rand said. No restriction on that. As a matter of fact, the boy's grandfather said he even ate cardboard, the white stuff they pack boxes with, and a rubber washer. He probably has a stomach like the town incinerator.
He ate a washer? Billy repeated.
That's what the man said. Billy reached into the magazine rack adjoining the sofa and found a crumpled piece of cardboard. Rolling it into a ball, he offered it to the furry creature.
Here, Gizmo, he said. Try this for a snack.
Gizmo sniffed at the pulpy white mask. Many years before, on a whim, he decided to humor the Chinese man by eating a tasteless object. He had enjoyed seeing the old man's pleasure, and, fortunately, it was a pleasure that not perpetrated on him very often. That was because the Chinese gentleman had a sense of responsibility and self-control. Rapidly assessing his new situation, Gizmo doubted seriously that these people would be able to restrict themselves quite as well. If he gave in to them now, before long they would have him eating every insipid piece of junk they could find, just to have a laugh. No, clearly this was the time to train his new owners, and train them right. Turning aside, he refused to have anything to do with the cardboard.
I guess he's not hungry, Billy said. Either that or the Chinese man was pulling your leg.
Lynn returned from the kitchen holding a small slice of meatloaf in the palm of her hand.
Let's see what he does with this,
he said. Gizmo sniffed, quivered with anticipation a moment, and snapped up the delicious morsel and forced himself to chew slowly so as to savor it. By the time he swallowed the mouthful, his contented hum had returned. The family seemed pleased. Gizmo was pleased too. At least with this group, he'd never swallow another petroleum-based product again. Gizmo, coming to his new family. That is some good and minty, delicious stuff. Chapter 8. The few days remaining before Christmas passed quickly, except for the youngsters of Kingston Falls Junior-Senior High School. Because of a heavy, early snowfall in November, which had canceled classes for nearly a week, the pre-Christmas vacation had been shortened by 2 days, which meant that classes seemed to drag on interminably. If the kids didn't like this state of affairs, Roy Hansen liked it even less. Getting their attention was difficult even enough under the best of circumstances. Breaking through the wall of lethargy so close to Christmas was another definition of impossible. Still, one had to try. That was part of the challenge of teaching. And if that was one thing Roy Hansen liked, it was a challenge. The first black instructor at an exclusive private school in the country. He had left there 3 years ago and become only the second black teacher in Kingston Falls. Now at 34, he was recognized as one of the best biology and natural science instructors in the area. Tall and stockily built, he was a teacher with whom few students messed. He was a teacher with whom few students messed. Corporal punishment in the public schools was a thing of the past, of course, but at times Hansen could be so aroused by an uncooperative student that some wondered if there might be a one-day revival. Keeping the class members a bit nervous, particularly the potential troublemakers, was part of Hansen's strategy, and it generally worked. Soon he had no undercurrents of crosstalk to compete with, and certainly no overt wisecracks. That was exactly the way he wanted it. There were limits, of course. He could command their attention, but not necessarily their interest. Recognizing this, he decided to abandon their study of the circulatory system of the frog in favor of an illustrated talk he had worked up dealing with new animals. It was a pet, so to speak, topic to which he had dedicated considerable research. Someday, he hoped to sell it as an article or monograph in a scholarly magazine. One thing was sure: if he could raise these students from their lethargy with it, it had to be something. "We hear a lot about animals becoming extinct," he began. "But what we don't hear much about is some new animals which have only recently been discovered. In 1812, a scientist named George Cuvier announced that every species that existed on Earth had been discovered already, but he was wrong." Pressing the slide changing button, he pronounced a photo of a deer-like animal with long, wavy horns. "Anybody know the name of this animal?" he asked. No one did. "It's called an okapi, and it's a close relation to the giraffe. Man didn't see his first live okapi until 1900. He changed the slide. "Anyone know the name of this animal?" he asked. No one did. He told them about the mountain nyala, pygmy hippopotamus, Komodo dragon, Andean wolf, Congo peacock, cupre, coelacanth, and long-nosed peccary, all of which had been discovered or rediscovered during the 20th century. No one knew anything, and no one volunteered any questions. Except Pete Fontaine. "Mr. Hansen," he said. Hansen nodded, silently thankful that someone had gotten more out of the lecture than 20 minutes worth of daydreaming. "Yes?"
Is it worth anything if you discover a new animal?
It was, Roy Hansen thought, a surprisingly good question. Embarrassingly, he didn't know the answer. "I really guess it depends," he replied. "I suppose if you found one animal that the government or the zoo wanted very badly, you could sell it for a good sum. Most scientists are more interested in the glory that goes along with such a discovery, though."
That would mean money, wouldn't it?
Pete persisted. "I mean, they could go on TV and recommend pet food and stuff." The class giggled. Roy Hansen smiled, and Pete beamed at having created a joke without having to brave the teacher's wrath. A mild chain reaction was caused by Pete's question. One student asked where you could go in the hopes of finding a new species. Another asked how you could tell if an animal was new or just something strange he had never seen before. It was all academic, of course, since there was practically no chance a person could casually encounter a new species. Such spontaneous interest in a topic was rare, so rare that Roy Hansen encouraged the discussion to go on until the bell ended the class. "Tomorrow we'll get back to the frog," he said, smiling when the class emitted a predictable groan. As he turned his attention to some papers on his desk, he caught a glimpse of Pete Fontaine about to leave. He smiled and gave him a little wave.
Pete smiled slightly in response, the most that he would allow himself, lest some other student accuse him of playing up to the teacher. Outside, he continued to feel good about the attention he had gotten and discussion he had generated. He was feeling so good, in fact, that he decided to go visit Billy Peltzer after putting in a couple hours as a Christmas tree. For the past few days, Billy had gotten up early and returned home as soon as he finished work at the bank. The reason, of course, was Gizmo. He was such a fascinating creature. Billy wanted to be with him every minute. He was vulnerable, too. Only while shaving, with Gizmo watching contentedly, Billy had accidentally turned the mirror so that it caught the hallway light and reflected it back at Gizmo. Shrieking loudly as the beam of light blinded him, Gizmo had toppled from the edge of Billy's desk into the waste can, falling on his head. By the time Billy got to him, the tiny creature was bruised, bleeding, and quivering with shock and fear. He was in such a bad state that even Barney, still chafing with jealousy, whined in sympathy. Billy wrapped the wound in a bandage, talked soothingly to him for a long time, and eventually lulled him to sleep. The next day, Gizmo was markedly better. Billy was glad, for he would not enjoy taking Gizmo to a veterinarian who would have no idea what sort of animal he was. "Watch Gizmo for me, will you, Mom?" Billy called as he left the house for work. "Why?" she asked. "He's in a cage, isn't he?" "Yeah, but with that cut in his head and all." "Okay, I'll drop in every once in a while and see how he's doing," he promised. "And we can keep the hotline open to the vet." "Thanks, Mom." He arrived at work early, a habit he'd taken up since the incident with Mrs. Deagle. The door to Roland Corbin's office was open, but no one seemed to be in the bank. Hearing a rustle of paper, he hung up his coat and looked around for the source of the sound. "Billy?" he heard Kate's voice whisper. She was in Corbin's office. On the desk was a large map of Kingston Falls, detailed enough to include every street, home, and business. Some of the buildings were marked in red, all included in a section bounded by a dotted black line. Kate was staring down at the map, her lips tight and eyes blazing. "Have you seen this?" she asked. Billy shrugged. "Kingston Falls?" he murmured. "Yeah, I've been there." She didn't appreciate his flippancy. "Look at the places in red," she said. "What's it mean?" he asked. "Those are the homes of people who are renting or leasing from Mrs. Deagle. Most of them are people who are out of work, laid off, or just can't afford to keep up the payments. And Mrs. Deagle is taking advantage of that." "How? She can't evict all those people at once." "The heck she can't." "But then, who would pay the rent?" "She doesn't need the rent money. It looks like she's interested in a takeover here." Kate put her finger on some of the squares. "Your house is in red, and so's mine." "Yeah, but Dad's not that far behind in the payments. Just one or two." "Neither is my family, in fact. We're in okay shape." "So what does the red mean?" "I think it means property she can take over in a hurry if she wants to. Something about options." "But what's she going to do with all of them?" "She wants to own everything." "Why? What for?" "I heard them talking in the office a few days ago," Kate whispered. "Mrs. Deagle's been having meetings with the president of Hittox Chemical. She wants to sell them the land." "So they can build a plant here?" Billy murmured, aghast. Kate nodded. It's like a big Monopoly game to her," he said. "We're just pieces of paper to buy and sell." "You got it," Kate replied. "We've got to stop her, Billy." "You and me?" "For starters, somebody's got to do something." "Yeah, but what?" "That's what I say." "That's what I say. What?" a familiar voice asked. The response of Billy's query came not from Tate, but from Gerald Hopkins, who had entered quietly while the young couple were bent over the map. As they turned to look at him, their expressions surprised and discomforted. His was in glory. For the moment, at least, they were in his power.
Snooping, eh?
He smiled. Kate and Billy merely stared at him, there being no logical way they could deny their action.
Mr. Corbin doesn't like snooping employees,
Gerald said as he slowly took off his coat and hung it in the closet. Enjoying the game of cat and mouse, he looked at Kate through narrowed eyelids.
But maybe I don't have to tell him,
he added meaningfully. Kate didn't answer.
You busy tonight?
Gerald asked. I'm busy every night, she replied. With a toss of her head, she stormed out of the office. Gerald watched her go. Then turning to face Billy, he forced a smile.
I like her,
he said.
She's tough, just like me.
Just like you, Jer. Just like you, Jer, Billy repeated derisively.
I told you not to call me that.
Sorry, Jer. I keep forgetting. Billy smiled as he strolled out of the office. He and Kate had little chance to discuss the problem the rest of the day. Although Billy thought about it quite a bit. Did it mean his family would be thrown out on the street? If so, where would they ever find a place as nice as their present home? Depressed at the end of the working day, Billy went home, hoping to find some solace in Gizmo or the new cartoon strip he was working on. Arriving home, he first went upstairs to check on Gizmo, who was sleeping peacefully, a happy smile on his face. Feeling a little bit better, he returned to the kitchen to find something good to eat. The refrigerator didn't offer much that interested him. He sighed. Have an orange, his mother suggested. Billy shrugged, took an orange from the refrigerator, and moved gingerly towards the unusual-looking appliance that sat on top of the counter. I think you can use it now, Lynn smiled, no doubt sensing his nervousness. Your father tinkered with it last night, and it peeled an orange perfectly. One orange, Billy said, grinning. Out of how many? Don't ask, she said. Shrugging again, he opened the top of the device, across the side of which was inscribed, Peltzer Peeler Juicer. Flip the switch to peel, and place the orange in the stainless steel bowl provided for it. Closing the lid, he pushed the start switch. The appliance immediately began to shake and make gurgling noises. Billy moved several feet away, experience having taught him that Dad's machines often had a way of giving one an impromptu shower. This time, however, it seemed to be working. From the bottom of the device, a perfectly dry spiral of rind slowly unwound itself. Hey! Billy exclaimed. It peeled perfectly! The machine shut itself off and Billy opened the lid. Nothing was inside. Where's the orange? He demanded, turning the machine on edge, shaking it, hitting its sides. It's not supposed to be in the top, his mother said. No, he replied. It's not there. The darn thing peeled the orange and then ate it itself. Maybe that's what it's supposed to do, Lynn laughed. It's an automatic orange eating machine. They were still giggling a moment when a knock sounded at the front door. Anybody home? Pete Fontaine. Anybody home? Pete Fontaine asked, poking his head inside. Sure, come on in, Pete, Billy said. I brought you that tree your ma said she liked the other day, he said, dragging a Scotch pine behind him. After replacing the sword, which had fallen on cue, they set up the tree and studied it. Maybe I'd better see if I can get this trimmed before your father gets home, Lynn said. I think he's been fooling around with something that hangs the tinsel automatically, and I'd rather not have him try it out. Would you like to help us? Pete asked politely. Not necessary. Thanks, Go, she said. Why don't you go upstairs and... Oh, would you like us to help? Pete asked politely. Not necessarily. Thanks, though, she said. Why don't you go upstairs and look at Gizmo? That's right, Billy smiled, snapping his fingers. I've got a new pet. Oh, yeah? Pete said. What is it? I don't know. Nobody knows. Come on, Pete said skeptically. I'm not kidding, Billy insisted. Come on upstairs and see for yourself. Walking up the stairs, Pete said with a confident tone in his voice,
I called up Mary Ann Fabrizio last night. Asked her for a date.
Yeah? How'd it go? Billy asked.
Well, I was all ready to be smooth and confident, just like you said, but when she answered, I couldn't remember my name.
Billy laughed.
So I said, wrong number,
in a really high-pitched voice, and hung up. Pete continued,
maybe I'll try again in a couple days. Give her time to forget the voice.
Well, good luck, Billy said. Just try to remember that you're doing her a favor.
Yeah, if I can remember my name.
They entered the darkened room and made their way to the bedstand, on which Gizmo's cage sat. Pete, who shared a room with his two brothers, was impressed with all the privacy Billy had. For one thing, there was a double bed, all for himself, and Billy could arrange things just the way he wanted. Walking slowly, taking it all in, Pete was fascinated by the walls, which were covered with comic strips, medieval drawings, Rosetta paintings of warriors. On the dresser was a miniature suit of armor, and further on, a big drawing table covered with pens, pencils, erasers, a large green paper cutter, paintbrushes soaking in cans, and a stack of drawings with an elaborate title page reading, The Secret of the Dragon's Lair. Below it, Billy had signed his name. Pete's mouth dropped open slowly.
Golly, he said, you're really good.
Billy smiled.
Thanks. It'll look even better when I smooth out those colors.
Somewhat embarrassed at the praise, Billy was thankful, and Gizmo let out a high-pitched chirping noise, attracting both his and Pete's attention. The television set next to the bed was on, showing an old movie with Clark Gable as a racing car driver, and Gizmo was watching with intense interest, almost as if he were a human being.
Holy cow, what's that?
Pete whispered.
It's my new pet. We call him Gizmo. Where'd you get it? My dad brought it back. From Chinatown.
The two boys went on the edge of the bed, Pete kneeling so as to get a better look at the furry creature.
You keep him in a cage all the time?
He asked. No, just while I'm at work. We're afraid he might get into things, you see. He's very delicate, can't stand light, and the telephone rang. Billy answered it and was delighted to hear the sound of Kate's voice, as she proceeded to tell him some more scuttlebutt she had picked up at Dory's pub concerning Mrs. Deagle's plan. Billy gently lifted Gizmo from the box and held him in his lap. Pete moved closer so he could stroke the animal and listen to the contented sounds he made. What happened between you and Gerald after I left? Kate asked finally.
Nothing much. I called him Jer a few times. That's all.
He handed Gizmo to Pete and leaned back against the pillow. Enjoying this moment with Kate, he liked being her secret ally in the war against Mrs. Deagle, even if he had no idea what to do to thwart her takeover plan. Kate had plenty of ideas, however, most involving petitions and getting the story to newspapers and television people. As he listened to her, Billy kept one eye on Pete and Gizmo. To give him some privacy, Pete had moved toward the drawing board and window, but as it was dark out, Billy saw no cause for alarm. Why don't you drop by the pub when I get off, and we'll talk some more about it, Kate asked. Well, Billy stammered, suddenly realized that she was very nearly asking him for a date. What time? I get off at 11, she said. Sure, okay, he murmured. That's not too late. It can keep, he added. You don't sound too hot on the idea. Oh, no, he replied. I was just surprised. What? Never mind. We'll talk about it later. Okay, she said. If you can't make it, it's all right. No, it's... He saw the situation developing in the same sort of slow-motion action they used to show football and basketball replays. Gizmo seated on the drawing table top, Pete stroking him, the edge of Pete's jacket sleeve catching up the paint can with soaking brushes inside, the can tipping, a drop of water falling onto the floor, then another larger mass of water slopping over the rim, towards Gizmo's back. "No!" he heard himself shout. It was too late. As the water struck the tiny creature's back, Billy shouted, "Accident!" into the telephone, hung up, and hurling himself across the room, tried to wipe the beating water off of Gizmo's body. A high-pitched scream told him the damage that had already been done. His eyes wider than ever, his spine arched and mouth open, gasping, Gizmo rolled over and over on the drawing board. A crackling sound like a forest fire seemed to be coming from his body, forming a hideous counterpoint to his pitiful cries. "What do I do?" Pete shouted, practically in tears. "It's the water," Billy yelled back. "It's not your fault. He can't be around water." Indeed, Gizmo appeared to be ready to burst. 5 huge spots had formed on his back where the water had landed, and now they were growing, blood red and yellow, like mountainous blisters, spreading and popping like miniature volcanoes. The membranes tightened and stretched until one of them finally burst. A small furry ball popped out, landing on the desktop. Pete and Billy retreated, fascinated and horrified. Another ball popped from the second blister. Then a third, fourth, and fifth. The crackling diminished then, as did Gizmo's cries of pain. Billy wondered if he was dying. In another minute, it was all over. Gizmo, his breathing gradually returning to normal, lay quietly as the blistered areas on his back bonded together and began to disappear, like time-lapse photography of a wound healing. "Thank goodness," Billy said. "I think he's all right." "But what are those things?" Pete asked. The 5 balls had already started to grow and form themselves into shapes similar to Gizmo. Soon it was obvious that more Mogwai had been created. The 2 boys watched astounded as the creatures grew. "This is better than Twilight Zone," Pete murmured. "I just wonder what my folks are going to say," Billy muttered darkly. "Maybe they're good to eat," Pete offered. Now the 5 newcomers were half as large as Gizmo, who sat watching them with large, tearful eyes. Once or twice he glanced at Billy reproachfully, then looked away sadly. Billy wondered if Gizmo was surprised by the incident, or if he had known or sensed that there was a possibility of its happening. Perhaps it had happened before. Even as they grew, Billy could tell there was something different. The new Mogwai had slightly different coloring than Gizmo, but that wasn't it. There was something strange about the expression on their faces and in their eyes. Though younger than Gizmo, they seemed less innocent. There was a craftiness there Billy had never seen in Gizmo's large brown eyes. "Can I have one?" Pete asked, interrupting Billy's thoughts. His first inclination was to say yes. Why not? If one of Gizmo was enough, 6 was certainly an excess. Yet Billy had no desire, having been careless once, to compound his error. Snatching up the paint can and mopping up every bead of water, he watched as the 5 new Mogwai continued to approximate Gizmo's size. "I guess not," he said finally. "This may be a nightmare, you know. Until we find out, I think it's best to keep them all here." Pete nodded thoughtfully. "Maybe we should take one to Mr. Hanson and find out if it's a new species or not." That's a good idea," Billy replied. "We could be rich and famous." Billy wasn't so sure. Everything had happened so fast. Suppose instant reproduction occurred again. He remembered the Star Trek episode in which the cuddly creatures known as the Tribbles practically took over an entire spaceship. He had a quick vision of Mogwai stopping at the pipes of his home, lying wall to wall in every room and hallway, a blanket of squealing animals crying out for food even as they continued multiplying. Suppose more of them made them dangerous in some way. If they took over neighbors' homes, would the police arrest Billy for starting the problem? And on a more immediate level, what explanation could he give Mom and Dad? He had been careless and violated the Chinese boy's admonition. To Pete, the new arrivals added up to be rich and famous. To Billy, they spelled nothing but trouble. Woo! My voice is a little bit la 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 today. See freshness. But we are going for at least another one. At least another one. Another one. Chapter 9. After Pete left, Billy sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, trying to think as he watched the 5 new Mogwai reach maturity. Logic indicated that he should report what had happened to his parents immediately. He had not done such a terrible thing, after all. Nothing more than relax his vigilance for a moment. The Chinese boy said to keep Gizmo away from water, but the Chinese man also said that Gizmo ate rubber washers and cardboard. Information that turned out to be false. How could he have known that such a minor oversight could lead to the creation of 5 new creatures? Although logic was on his side, Billy nevertheless needed time to think. For a brief while, at least, he wanted to see if he could solve the problem himself. Pete had made one good suggestion. As soon as possible, one of the Mogwai should go to Mr. Hanson for scientific study. He wondered if some laboratories or zoos might be interested also. Surely in a world filled with thousands of stray dogs and cats, it could be possible to find a good place to unload the 5 new Mogwai. He was already sure of one thing. He did not like the new additions very much. They seemed combative, uncontrollable, and, compared to Bit Gizmo, aggressive. When they finished growing, Billy found a large cardboard box and put them inside. But they indicated their displeasure at confinement by gesticulating angrily, baring their teeth, and sticking their tongues out at him. The leader of the new group seemed to be a slightly larger one with a thick white stripe of coarse fur standing up from his head.
I'll call you Stripe, okay?
Billy whispered, trying to strike up a friendship with the new Mogwai. In response, Stripe knocked over an ink bottle with a quick swipe of his paw. As it drained down the side of the drawing board, Billy noted with horror that some of the liquid had spilled onto Stripe, Gizmo, and another new Mogwai. Silently and nervously, he watched the ink spots to see if anything happened. A few moments passed and nothing changed. Apparently only water made them reproduce, even though I'm sure there'd be some water in the ink. At least that one's break, he sighed with relief. Not long afterwards, when it became obvious the new arrivals were hungry, Billy went down to the kitchen and brought up some cold chicken for them. Unlike Gizmo, who ate in a slow and civilized manner, the new Mogwai slurped and tore noisily at the food, spitting out gristle and letting saliva drain from the corners of their mouth. Filled, they belched grossly, and then they began to play with each other by spitting bits of food.
Hey, Gizmo, Billy said. Isn't there some way you can help these guys behave?
Gizmo's sad eyes told him more than he cared to even to suspect. Fortunately, his parents had gone out for dinner. That meant he could delay his explanation and at least have time to form an idea of how difficult the new arrivals would be. He learned immediately that food made them drowsy. After gorging themselves and playing briefly, the 5 new Mogwai curled up in the box and went to sleep. Gizmo, like Billy, remained awake, watching them. His expression was a mixture of apprehension and sadness, the same emotions he had worn his first half hour in the Peltzer home. Billy wondered how much he knew. Was the downward curl of his mouth caused by knowledge, or merely jealousy? He would have given a week's pay to be able to have a meaningful conversation with his furry friend, but of course that was impossible. Pondering the problem, Billy drifted off to sleep, but not to rest, for his mind provided him only more anxiety. In one nightmare, the Mogwai had continued growing until they were as large as his house. In another, which followed immediately, they were spitting fire and hurling bits of flame no larger than jelly beans, which clung to people like napalm. Billy awoke with a start, experienced a moment of relief, and then became aware of a new terror. The room was completely dark. The small lamp on his desk and another on his drawing board, both of which had been on when he fell asleep, were off. No light entered the room except a thin parallelogram of illumination from outside. Was it possible that both bulbs had blown simultaneously? Even as he tried to convince himself such was the case, Billy knew the odds against it were astronomical. In the background, from beyond the first layer of darkness, he could hear a rustling sound, a muffled voice, the sort of noise you hear at a surprise party when everybody is huddled in corners trying not to laugh or move. It was eerie. For a long moment he lay unmoving on his bed, his ears straining to pick up a recognizable sound. At the same time, he moved his eyes from side to side as his vision adjusted to the darkness, hoping he could discover what was going on. A minute passed and he relaxed. He had awakened, he told himself, in a fearful and susceptible mood created by the nightmares. Other than that, he was alive and well in his own room. Taking a deep breath, he swung himself off the bed and toward the desk lamp. Suddenly, he collapsed and found himself lying face down on the rug. His legs were paralyzed. A chorus of hysterical giggles, unlike anything he had ever heard before, filled the room. Whatever it was, they had caused it. Dragging himself to his desk, Billy reached up and turned the switch. To his relief, the light went on. Pulling himself to a sitting position, his back against the wall, he looked across the room and then down at his legs. They were taped together. He could hardly believe his eyes, but the evidence was clear. 3 neat bands of silver tape, one at the ankles, one just above the knees, and a third one above the knees, encircled him. He had slept that soundly, or an even worse thought. They were such dexterous sneaks that they had been able to tie him up without him feeling a thing. Grabbing at the tape, he freed himself, stood up, and looked around. The room seemed different, but he could not figure out exactly how. Moving gingerly, he leaped and did a mid-air pirouette as something touched his arm. The object fluttered to the floor. It was nothing more than an old comic strip from the newspaper. But what was it doing? Billy looked up and gasped. The entire ceiling was covered with an array of comic strips, medieval drawings, and Frazetta paintings that he had collected and pinned to one wall of the room. As he surveyed the dangling articles, which in the semi-darkness resembled peeling wallpaper, he heard the unearthly giggles again. That was such a bad giggle. All right, he called out. It was a great joke. You can come out now. Going to the wall switch, he turned on the main light and promptly heard the giggles change to cries of pain. Reacting quickly, he flipped the switch off and went to his drawing board. The addition of the second small light provided enough illumination for him to study the entire room. In one corner, 2 of the new Mogwai sat, one on each side of Gizmo, as if guarding him to make sure he didn't ruin their little jokes. A quick look around, even under the bed and in the closet, failed to turn up the other 3. Billy fixed the 2 newcomers with what he hoped to be an intimidating glare. Okay, where are your pals? He demanded. They looked at one another, twitched their pug noses, and chattered lightly in Mogwai language, studiously ignoring Billy. Gizmo directed a glance at the door, for which he received a couple of not-so-playful pats from his brother. Or were they sons? Billy had no time to ponder it. Striding to the door, he turned the knob and pulled. The door did not open. Looking downward, Billy saw the reason. Beneath the door had been jammed bits of eraser from his drawing board, as well as rolled-up globs of silver tape. Now Billy was filled with a sense of urgency, if not downright alarm. They're tying him up, turning off the lights, and rearranging his clippings from wall to ceiling were clever pranks. But if they had designated 2 of their group to lock him in the room, and the other 3 must really be up to something. Tearing at the tape and erasers, he freed the door and started into the hallway. Thoroughly impressed with the guile of the new Mogwai, he moved carefully, his eyes alert for hidden wires or anything else that could trap him or cause him to fall. The rest of the house, of course, was in an almost total darkness. Proceeding slowly, he turned on small lights as he moved down the hallway and the stairs. His first surprise came soon, as he stepped on a plastic cup that had been placed on the steps along with several dozen other pieces of china. The cup rattled to the bottom of the stairway, setting off a chain reaction of giggles from the first floor area. Turning right into the living room, Billy spotted the first Mogwai under the sofa, gleefully shredding the evening paper. It was so intent on its work that Billy walked past without attracting its attention. Another Mogwai was in the kitchen, delicately arranging packages on the cupboard shelves so the slightest touch would send them toppling. The third was in the den, curled up on the sofa, watching a rerun of Gilligan's Island. Billy sighed a breath of relief. Although there was some indication of the rooting through things, he could detect no grand scheme of things or wholesale sabotage. All he had to do now was round them up and clean up the mess they had made. But how? The Mogwai moved at a slow pace, owing to their short legs and small size, but 5 of them were too big, an armful. Barney's transporter. Barney's transporter, he whispered, snapping his fingers as the idea struck him. It was still in the back of the basement, a large plywood box with handles and a lockable lid they had purchased during one period of Barney's life when he absolutely refused to go to the vet's without a struggle. Looking inside, Billy judged it would be large enough for 5 Mogwai, although sleeping peacefully would require a bit of cooperation. With the top opened, Billy tiptoed up the stairs and slipped into the den. Catching the first one was easy. It had fallen asleep while watching television. Grasping him firmly beneath the belly, Billy dropped him into the box, closed the top, and proceeded into the kitchen. That one, the Mogwai he called Stripe, put up more of a battle, but soon he was safely inside the transporter. After grabbing the paper shredder from beneath the sofa, he retracted his steps to the bedroom, where, to his surprise, nothing had changed. A minute later, all 5 Mogwai were safely in the box. They chattered noisily at him, but he was undismayed. "You can say anything you like," he said. "Nobody will hear you anyway, because I'm going downstairs to clean up the mess you made." Only after he had patrolled the entire house and set everything in order did Billy happen to glance at the clock. It was midnight. He had missed his date with Kate. "Darn," he muttered. He wondered if she'd even come close to hearing an excuse such as the one he would have to give if limited to nothing but the truth. But he'd been taped up otherwise, harassed by 5 strange beings who had been born that very day when some water fell on Gizmo's back. Somehow, he had the feeling she just wouldn't buy it. Arriving home shortly after 1 o'clock, Lynn and Rand were both exhausted. The hall light was on, but no light came from beneath Billy's door. "I guess you went to bed hours ago," Rand said, yawning. He brushed his teeth quickly and undressed, eager to experience their bed's softness. Having already folded back the covers, Lynn gave him a little kiss as she went into the bathroom. Rand stretched, sat on the bed, lifted his perennial aching feet, and slipped them beneath the sheets. Suddenly, they encountered something cold and hard, causing him to recoil so violently that he fell onto the floor. Billy was up early the next morning, despite sleeping only fitfully. Immediately after being locked in the transporter, the 5 new Mogwai had tried for nearly an hour to intimidate him with their threatening-sounding gibberish, but he had managed to outlast them. Stripe, the final holdout, had finally given up on the ghost with a final snarl, and all of them had fallen asleep. They were somewhat restless, but quiet, when Billy got up, dressed, and went downstairs. His mother was in the kitchen, having already made the coffee and set the table for breakfast. She smiled a greeting at Billy, then turned her head slightly sideways. "Why did you do that last night?" she asked. "Do what?" "Put the rack from the oven in our bed." Billy looked for a blank moment. "Only you could have done it," Lynn said. "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. And your father was so shocked, I'm sure he didn't do it." "Oh. What's that mean?" Lynn asked.
It means I have to talk with you and Dad.
He's in his workroom. Rand was at his bench in the incredibly messy basement area that served as his workroom. Years ago, he had staked it out and paneled the walls himself, promptly lining them with portraits of Thomas Edison, Elias Howe, Alexander Graham Bell, Samuel F.B. Morse, Guglielmo Marconi, and perhaps his greatest hero, Whitcomb L. Judson. Once, when Billy had asked who he was, Rand had waxed eloquent. These other men made great contributions and were rewarded with fame, he said. And there's no doubt that the phonograph, sewing machine, telegraph, and wireless have benefited our society. But where would they be without the zipper? And that's what Judson gave us, my boy. Only they were called universal fasteners or slide fasteners back in the 1890s when they invented them. Now, bent beneath a giant blueprint of the bathroom buddy, pinned to the wall above the desk, Rand was tinkering with the strange-looking object, which could solve all one's morning grooming problems. Providing, of course, one had several engineering degrees and lots of patience. Billy knocked lightly and entered. Just added a new feature to the bathroom buddy, Rand said, not looking up from his work. Launching immediately into a sales pitch, he held up the object. Say you're a few minutes late for that big meeting. You reach up and touch your chin, and oh no, you forgot to shave. Now what? Do a lot of people forget to shave before big meetings? Billy asked ingeniously. Sure, Rand replied. It can happen. But then you'd have to forget to shower or take a bath too, wouldn't you? Not necessarily. Some people shower or bathe the night before, so they'll save time. Billy nodded, looking pleased with himself, as if he'd won a major point in a battle against ignorance. Rand flipped a switch. A tiny double-edged razor appeared from a slot in the side, as if by magic. Hey, neat, Billy smiled. He reached out to take the bathroom buddy, holding it as if to shave. Then, noticing another button on the side near the razor, he said, I guess this is for the foam, huh? No, don't. It was too late. Billy had touched the button, causing a jet of white cream to head for the ceiling. Nearly dropping the bathroom buddy, he leaped aside as the spray ricocheted back down at him. That's the shaving cream button, Rand said. But I haven't figured out how to lower the pressure yet. Oh. Don't worry. I'll get it. Yeah, Dad. I'm sure you will. During the brief pause that followed as Rand wiped the excess foam off his invention, they both remembered something important. Oh, Dad. Son? There's something I have to, they both began. Go ahead, Billy said. I just wanted to ask why you put that thing in our bed, Rand said. That's what I came down to tell you about, Billy explained. Well, go ahead, Rand urged a few seconds later, when it was obvious his son was somewhat at a loss for words. Billy sat down in the workroom's only chair and slowly explained what had happened the night before. His father listened. At first it was an incredulous smile, then with growing horror. You mean the Chinese boy was right? He asked. Finally. That's what water does? Makes them multiply? Billy nodded. And now we have 6? He nodded again. It's crazy. Animals don't multiply like that. I know. Where are they now? In my room. I have them locked in a transporter we got for Barney. Good. They're very anxious to get out, Billy said. If we try to keep them there all the time, the noise may drive us loony. Maybe I better have a look. A minute later, Billy's parents watched as he opened the top of the transport. Inside sat the 5 new Mogwai, Stripe in the forefront, their faces innocent and liquid-eyed, except for a subtle glint in their eyes. They seemed every bit as gentle as Gizmo, as friendly as Barney. They're cute, Finn smiled. Yeah, Billy said, but they're not the same as Gizmo, Mom. They're not? How are they different? They're mischievous. He related that to the He related what they had done last night, in addition to putting the oven rack in his parents' bed. Even Billy had to admit that their actions sounded more like harmless pranks than deeds with malevolent possibilities. Maybe they were just nervous and excited, Lynn offered. After all, it was their first night on Earth. No, Mom, Billy countered. There was something about them. Something scary. Is it still there? Not exactly, he said. But it is, in a way. You see, they must have decided they didn't like being cooped up in the transporter, so they're putting on a good show for you and Dad. His parents laughed. Are these dumb animals or college professors? She asked. They're not stupid, Mom. That's why I think we'll have a lot of trouble if they stay here. What do you suggest? I don't know. Today Pete's going to ask Mr. Hanson if he'll study them. Maybe he'll take one and be able to tell us what they are. Why not just drop them off the Humane Society? Rand asked. Because if they're a rare species, they may be valuable, Billy replied. Well, Lynn said, if they're going to be here, even a few days, I'll not have them cooped up forever in that box. But you can't let them run loose either, Rand said. There's the shower, dishwasher, bathroom, and kitchen sinks. All those things give out water. If they turn on one of those things, we'll be up to our armpit in those gizmos. All right, Lynn shrugged. They can stay in Billy's room for the time being, but not in the box. And just in case they get out, I'll shut the bathroom doors and watch them, okay? Billy nodded. Lynn went to the box, opened the lid wide, and reached in to lift Stripe high above her head, his wide mouth forming a benevolent smile. Stripe gurgled cutely, the perfect picture of domesticity. He's darling, Lynn said. Indeed he was, Billy thought, but not during the brief moment when Lynn and Rand looked at each other. Stripe was able to direct a secret glance at Billy. Was it a sneer? Something close to a wink? Billy wasn't sure, but he couldn't help feeling apprehensive about the days ahead. And that is where we are stopping today, my friends. Oh. The next episode will be Chapter 10 and beyond. The next episode of Movies. On. Book with Romper. Thank you. Thank you, my friends that have joined me today. Thank you, Julie. Always so supportive. Love you, Julie. Thank you to all my friends. Thank you to all my friends that have joined me today. Special shout out to my friend Jonas, who decided to design the art for the channel. I don't know if I've thanked you yet, but I can thank you, man. I think I thanked you, but fucking thank you again. God damn it. It's awesome. Turned out so good. Thank you to my dogs who had decided to actually be good and not be in the way or crazy today. So. And most of all, thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for tuning in and supporting me, supporting this fun little thing that we're going on, this fun little journey. Something I enjoy doing, and I hope y'all enjoy it. Got to build my voice up a little bit for these crazy voices, you know. I never claimed to be a professional voice actor, you know. This is just something fun that I like doing, and you know, see where it goes from here. I enjoy it. I hope you all enjoy it. Thank you so much. No, I'm serious. Thank you. Thank you